What's good out there, Liquid Trucking, and welcome into the Liquid Trucking Podcast, episode 54. I'm your host, Marcus. Thank you so much for being here today. We've got another exciting episode planned for you here today, and it's going to be one of those informative ones where you can listen into some drivers with some real good experience under their belt and maybe pick up a couple of tips or just hear a great story of how somebody avoided disaster, because today we are talking about more winter driving prep. Now, whether that's before you get in the truck or having you prepared while you're actually out there with your foot on the gas, we're going to cover all those bases today. I'm very excited about it. We have a couple of active drivers for Liquid coming on. We also have a former driver and now terminal staff member coming on to share some of his experience. And there's a chance that we might get lucky and get a fourth Liquid Trucking employee on today. So the reason that I'm kind of keeping these names all close to the vest at this point in time is because we haven't recorded that second segment yet, and I don't want to say somebody's name and then have to call my editor, Mike, and have him go find it and edit it out. So just understand, we're getting at least 3 Liquid Trucking employees today. 2 of them are currently drivers. Chance that we might get a fourth total employee on here, which I'm very excited about, so we'll just have to wait and see. I got to doing a little bit of research here, looking around at all the different websites and forums and all this stuff, and I figured why not put together a few winter facts for you guys. Of course, we kind of update these each and every year, and we didn't get to any facts the last time we talked about winter driving. We kind of filled up the whole time just having a conversation, so I wanted to go ahead and squeeze this in here real quick. We'll get to some winter driving statistics here in just a moment, but first, the homework that we always have to get to, we got to make sure you guys are checking out the website. Head over to liquidtrucking.com. It's the homepage for Liquid Trucking. Everything that you need, whether you want to work at Liquid, whether you already do work at Liquid, or whether you just want to learn about the company, it's all there at liquidtrucking.com. It's a fantastic, very all-inclusive, and easy-to-navigate website. Another thing that website has is a podcast landing page for this here podcast, the Liquid Trucking Podcast. When you go over and navigate to liquidtrucking.com, right at the top of the page on the banner, you'll see a picture of me that says check out our podcast. The button says like get started or learn more. Just click that and you will be at the place where all things podcast happen. This is where we're going to post pictures, recipes, anything that you guys send us from the road. This is where you're going to find it. Every single episode that you would like to listen to that we have ever done is right there on that homepage. It's a one-stop shop. This way you don't have to open up Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube or Google, whatever it is that you listen to. You can listen right from a browser. And just to give you guys a little peek behind the curtain here of what our numbers look like, I'm not going to get into like concrete numbers, how many people actually listen to each episode, but what I will tell you is about like 70 to 80% of our downloads come from the website. So, or a web browser in general, which tells us that people are navigating to the Liquid Trucking homepage, finding the podcast landing page from there, and checking out the episodes there. So again, liquidtrucking.com, click the banner at the top of the page that says podcast, and you will be at our all-inclusive podcast landing page where everything Liquid Trucking Podcast lives. Okay, time to get to a few winter driving facts here. Of course, I'm going to start off right up at the top from Truck Accident Support is where I got this particular statistic from. Annual weather-related crashes is what this has to do with. Around 21% of crashes each year in the United States are weather-related, with 17% of these occurring during snowy or icy conditions. This accounts for approximately 156,000 accidents annually. Something to think about there. The 17% of crashes that happen during snowy season is still 156,000 accidents. A lot of accidents. So, hey, just something to be thinking about. 23% of large truck crashes occur because drivers travel too fast for road and weather conditions. That one comes straight from the FMCSA, and, like them or not, they do know their statistics when it comes to this stuff. So we got to be thinking about that. Got to be slowing down out there, obviously. It's hard to control the truck. You guys know that. You don't need to hear it from me. Icy roads cause over 1,300 deaths and 116,800 injuries per year. I think that you guys would probably be in on this with me if I say if we could only prevent one of those with this podcast, if one person hears it and goes, man, I think I'm going to check my speed a little bit up in the pass this year, and they do, that could prevent one accident. We've done our job here. So that's kind of the reason that we're telling you these, is just to refresh the memory, let you know that, yeah, these are true stats, and these are the ones that you need to watch out for. This is why we're so careful during the winter. Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana are among the states with the highest winter driving fatalities due to snow and ice. This is actually a little bit of a positive statistic here from FMCSA. Fatalities actually decline during heavy snowstorms, and they think possibly this is due to fewer vehicles on the road, and the vehicles that are on the road driving at massively reduced speeds. So I like to see that. Listen, we've heard it on this podcast from a lot of people, a lot of drivers. If you don't think you can make it, then you shouldn't try. Okay, so that's another thing. Is like, if you want fatalities to decline all around, then keeping people off the roads when they're pretty much impassable is a good way to do so. Winter snowstorms can cost the U.S. economy approximately $1.2 billion per year. That's a lot of money. FMCSA recommends reducing speed by 50% on snow-packed roads and by 1/3 on wet roads. Now listen, I live in the Pacific Northwest. I drive on wet roads all the time. And like most four-wheelers out there, I probably don't follow the laws as well as I should, but I will guarantee you, if I drive an average of 60 miles an hour when it's dry, there is no way that I'm cutting it all the way down to 40 miles an hour when it's wet. And I assume that I probably speak for 95% of four-wheel drivers out there. So you big rig drivers have just got to keep your head on a swivel, man, because there's a lot of idiots driving around you out there. And when you see the FMCSA recommendations like that, it really kind of opens your eyes a little bit. FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, like they're only dealing with big rigs, right? And they obviously are recommending this 50% and 33% speed reduction. So it's something to think about there for sure in inclement weather. This also from the FMCSA, jackknifing has a significantly increased risk for tractor trailers in icy conditions, often caused, obviously, by sudden braking or excessive speed on slippery roads. You liquid, what do they call you, tanker draggers or tanker tuggers? You guys know that, all right? That liquid, the way it moves around in those tanks that you're hauling on icy and snowy roads, yeah, it's obviously braking. You guys have a lot of practice with that. So just another stat. Keep yourself out of a jackknife. I think that's pretty much a goal every day of every year. This is interesting about peak winter crash times. Crashes are more common in the winter during the early morning and early evening. This obviously has to do with the fact that the sun comes up, maybe softens stuff up a little bit, might melt some ice. And then, of course, 3 or 4 hours later, since we're in the winter, the sun goes down and things freeze up again. So that one makes sense. Northern and Midwestern states like Michigan and Indiana report the highest rates of winter-related large truck crashes. Of course, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, as I said earlier, already report as some of the highest for just crashes in general. But when you talk about big rig crashes, northern and midwestern states like Michigan and Indiana, Minnesota, Wyoming, these are the states that are reporting the highest rates of winter weather-related large truck crashes. Of course, there's some risk to cargo. You guys know this. Snow and ice accumulation on trailers adds weight, decreases stability. Not as big of a problem for our rounded-edged tankers out there, but you guys have to worry about a completely different set of problems, like things, seizing up on you, freezing up on you, solidifying on you. Obviously, we're tugging such a wide variety of different liquids across this country. Different temperatures and variations in temperature can definitely mess with that stuff. So just something to keep on the back of your mind. And finally, this one I left until last because I do believe that it is fairly impactful. Adverse weather contributes to about 1/4 of large truck speeding-related fatalities during the winter months. Again, a statistic from the FMCSA. 25%, 1/4, 1 in 4 of all fatalities speeding related during winter months. So just remember that out there, drivers. We always tell you on this podcast, we want you to stay safe, keep the shiny side up, especially during the winter when things can get real hairy out there. And joining me next, right around the corner here on the show, I've got some very well-experienced drivers and some very well-experienced staff members that used to be drivers coming on to join us. We're going to talk all things winter trucking. So stay tuned, because it's coming up right now on the Liquid Trucking Podcast.
Welcome to the gold standard of podcasts for the gold standard of drivers. This is the Liquid Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Welcome back into the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Very excited for this next interview. Joining me first, I've got the VP of HR and Safety from Liquid Trucking. I like to call him my honorary co-host because he is so instrumental in everything that happens on this podcast. Please welcome Jason Eisenman back to the show. Jason, it's great to have you here.
Likewise, ready to get started.
Awesome. Well, we got a great conversation planned and two very experienced drivers joining us today to talk about driving in the winter, all aspects of it. First off, he's one of the most tenured drivers at Liquid Trucking and a very good friend of this podcast. Please welcome Polar Bear back to the show. Polar Bear, glad to have you, my friend. How you doing out there?
I'm always glad to be on here.
Awesome.
I'm doing good.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. And also another good friend of the show. He's been a long tenured driver with Liquid as well. His name is Matt Kleich. Matt, thank you so much for being here, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Of course. Now, I want to jump right into this. And Jason, I know you've got some driving experience under your belt as well, so I'm going to hit you all three with this question and see if any of you guys have something for me on it. I was thinking about, back in your experience, everybody that's driven a truck seems to have at least one story of when inclement weather really caused them some problems. So I was wondering if you guys could share with me each the most challenging weather conditions that you faced while driving, and what made that so memorable for you. And really, I'm good to start with anybody, but Jason, do you have anything like that from your driving career that stands out as the most challenging moment in inclement weather?
I have a pretty darn good story. My driving experience was delivering groceries for a food service distributor, the world's largest, probably. So I won't name names, but you ever go to a restaurant all over any big city, you'll notice they don't build those parking lots for semis to fit in. So when you get 6, 10, 12 inches, a foot plus of snow, and you've got a 35-foot or 45-foot tractor trailer combination, even with a day cab, and you might have a tandem axle tractor or a single axle pup tractor pulling it. That's how they roll in the food service side. You're taking a small snowblower with you, and you're taking a shovel, and you're plowing your way to every door, and sometimes you're plowing yourself away to even get out of the parking lot because the food's still got to move, but the truck doesn't want to move in the snow, and no one's out there moving it for you. So shout out to all the food service delivery guys of the world in the winter. That's a pretty darn tough job for them.
Boy, I can imagine, man. I don't want to shovel my driveway when I don't have to get into a truck and drive it hundreds of miles to my next location. Shoveling someone else's driveway before doing that really doesn't seem like it would rate highly on my list of priorities.
No, it's definitely a young man's job. I did it from roughly 1999 to 2003. Give you an idea how long ago it's been.
Okay, all right. So don't like shoveling snow out of the way at the docks. That's obviously something that would remain memorable because a lot of blood, sweat, and tears probably went into those cold days for you out there, Jason. Thanks for telling me that. Polar Bear, let's go to you, man. Lots of experience out there on the road. you've been with Liquid a long time. Let's focus on the Liquid experience. What's the most challenging weather conditions that you've faced while tugging a tanker out there, Polar Bear?
So I'm pretty sure I haven't said this one before, but took a load of molasses to Worthington, Minnesota. I won't call it what Kleich and I call it, but just a winter day seemed okay. Went there and delivered. Somehow during the hour and a half I was there, didn't realize it because I was standing inside the building watching it unload. It rained and froze, so I knew it because I couldn't hardly walk, and you couldn't really stay there because they were so busy. So I took off and headed back towards Bartow and Sioux City, or South Sioux City, and I had no weight. So the more you got on it with the super singles, the more you got on it, you couldn't. You were actuating, kicking the rear end of it out, and so I just found a comfortable speed about 25, 30 mile an hour because nobody was out there. And there's a couple truck stops up there. I didn't. Yeah. My biggest thing is I didn't, being empty, most of them are downhill. I didn't want to take the risk of getting off on the off ramp on a curve, sliding, I was just thinking of everything in general, the truck and me. So that's, it's one of them that I was just nervous as everything, trying to make sure nobody come racing behind me like they sometimes do out here. Mm-hmm. So that's probably, as far as driving traffic or driving wise, that's probably one of my worst. And luckily Highway 60 coming down isn't hilly like some of the other roads. So, it's not like I had to try to get on it to make a hill or make sure that I'm going down the other side of the hill. Okay. So yeah, that's probably one of my more memorable ones. That was, I'm going to say 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And then the closer I got to Sioux City or South Sioux, I'm doing still 30, 35 mile an hour, and I start seeing traffic, and we got radars in front, and I'm watching as they come in front of me, and they're doing 55, 60, 65, and there's the idiots coming around me. Wow. So I kind of tested it, got on it. I was probably a half hour then from South Sioux, and I just, how every once in a while you'll get a borderline. You're running 80 until there, and next thing you know, you're running 30. So that's probably one of my more memorable ones.
And is there a lesson to be learned in there, Polar Bear? Because it doesn't sound like you could stay put. So shutting it down might not have been, and obviously you mentioned there was inherent danger, maybe even into driving into some of the truck stops, so you could shut down. So what did you take away from that experience? Because, we've had this conversation multiple times on the show, and I think that one thing that we always kind of touch on is, hey, don't try too hard out here. If you don't think you can make it, shut down. But you were in a scenario where you might not have been able to shut down, it sounds like. So what did you learn from that experience, PB?
Kind of exactly, and part of it that I forgot to tell is they got a huge snowstorm earlier that day, before that day, and they made lick tubs there. So the whole back lot where you could have parked hadn't even been cleared.
Oh, wow.
So that's the biggest reason that I couldn't stay there. I mean, there was places to stay. I always say we get hazard pay for doing what we do. You just don't see it. It's included in our check, but it's just one of the things that we got to keep trying to not only get the freight to the customer, but to get onto that next load. That's where we make our money.
Absolutely.
And over the years, I mean, if I had been, a rookie at this or something else, there's a good chance that maybe I couldn't. And Jason, you probably know too and I know Kleich knows, but that's how we know that the roads are slick. When you start seeing the trucks in the ditch, when you start seeing the four-wheelers in the ditch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and like I said, I think it was far enough ahead of me that there really was no other traffic. So I didn't see any of that.
Well, and it sounds like you just kind of relied on your experience there, kept it slow, kept it at a manageable rate. I mean, it's got to be like night and day, I would think. And this just comes from my experience of having a 1972 Chevy Stepside when I was a kid. Even the slightest little bit of water on the road, that thing had a posi track rear end in it. And even with just a little tiny bit of water, the back end would kick out all the time because there was no weight back there. It's just sheet metal box. Everything was up over the front tires. I assume that's a lot what it feels like to a much greater extent, obviously. Pulling around an empty tanker in that kind of weather, that thing probably moves all over on you out there.
Yeah, and try to move the truck and trailer by yourself, just seeing how much it weighs. I mean, even though it's 32,000 pounds total, that's a lot of weight that truck is trying to pull to keep going, right, and to keep your traction.
Right, absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Polar Bear. It's exactly what I was looking for here. And Kleich, I know you're going to have something along the same lines, so walk me through a story of the most challenging weather you faced while hauling tanker.
Yeah, and it's going to come back to we had a snowstorm. I don't remember how many years ago it was. I was under Chris Baltushis' dispatch, so I'm going to say in the last 4.5 years. Another gentleman, Alan Myatt, and I were running. We were both at the Bardo yard. He went ahead and took off. He was going up into Iowa. I had a load of caustic. I was going up into Green Plains over by Okoboji, Iowa. And he took off. He had all sorts of issues going up there. I took off. It took me forever to get up there. Even loaded it, just running up 60 like Polar Bear said. There's no hills, but it's a bad road in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of snow. We even had a lot of snow in South Sioux because they had to use the loader to pull me out so I could roll. So that started the day off. Then getting up there to get unloaded, that was I think it's a 2.5 hour trip. Took me 4 hours to get there. Then got unloaded, and then it took me like 6 hours to get back. Here's what happened out there on Highway 9. It was blowing and snowing so bad. They'd had a car. It's a 2-lane road, and they had a massive pile up, and they were using the Iowa State snowplows to push vehicles off the road.
Wow. Because they probably didn't have anything else that could handle that weather out there. The snowplows are equipped for it. Nothing else is.
Yeah, it was just one of those fluke deals. It was a snowstorm like Midwest normally gets.
Yeah.
Me, it was, I didn't want to go, but I thought, well, if I sit here all day, I'm just going to, like Polar Bear said, I'm just going to lose out on my money,
Yep.
So we try to go, I mean, not that I was real worried about an ethanol plant getting what they needed, but we had to try.
Absolutely. I hear you.
So we did it, and I made it back home. Like T-Bear said, that 60 can be a son of a gun, and coming around the curves to Lamar's, I was down to 25, 35 miles, about 35 mile an hour, and that was well before they had the Loves up there, the new Loves truck stop. So it was make or break it when you're out in that area.
Okay. And the same kind of lesson that it sounds like you learned from Polar Bear there is to kind of rely on your experience, rely on what you know, and take it as it comes to you, because you didn't have much of a choice, it doesn't sound like.
Yeah, I mean, Baltushis would have never shoved me to go if I didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
They're just that way at OFC Bardo. They just don't say, hey, you have to go. They want that truck and that load and you safe at all times. So they never, ever push, but we still get in our head that we got to go.
Sure. I mean, it's your paycheck, like Polar Bear said. And Jason, I want to turn this back to you for a bit of comment. As the VP of safety at Liquid Trucking, I assume that when you listen to the drivers talk about trepidations or maybe some thought that maybe I shouldn't go, maybe I should, what kind of runs through your mind there? Obviously, you guys have communicated plenty about what Liquid's policy is, but what are you thinking when you're hearing these guys talk about some of the challenges that they've gone through with inclement weather?
I like to reference back to the saying, everybody that's driving a truck, especially for a company like Liquid Trucking and all the other trucking companies out there, they're basically a bunch of CEOs behind the wheel, because the Department of Transportation places a lot of responsibility on every single driver, and company, but the driver alike. There's a lot of responsibility in all the decisions they make for how safe they are, all the folks on the road around them if they decide to operate in that weather. their own safety, and then getting the load there. So if you think about the decisions a truck driver has to make behind the wheel every day with, sometimes upwards of $250,000 to $350,000 worth of equipment and product out there, there's all kinds of hurdles in their way. So the company's standpoint is just like Matt said. We sometimes will. There's only been a few times where we've actually pulled trucks off the road at a fleet wide level and told everybody to pull over or not move. But for the most part, that weather is pretty regionalized. So if you got trucks moving from west coast to east coast, north to south, you got to look at the trucks that are in those areas. And if those drivers say, hey, it's no good to go, we need to pull it over, then that's their call, because they're behind the wheel and we're not, and we need them desperately to make those good decisions so that the truck and the freight all gets there along with them and they get to go home.
I love that, hearing that they're the CEOs sitting in those, it's the CEOs of that truck, of that load, for sure. And you talk about decision making. It's such an important part of the process, and that's why we wanted to bring on such experienced drivers here with Matt and Polar Bear and yourself, Jason, from both sides of the fence here, because we really want to give the message of, look, we all have to deal with it, but we want to talk to some of you really experienced drivers and figure out exactly how you deal with it. And so far, so good, gentlemen. I want to talk a little bit about the dynamics of what you guys are hauling. This is something that we haven't really touched on that much in our previous winter driving episodes. But first of all, are you guys ever hauling around partially loaded tankers? Polar Bear, Matt, you guys always full or empty, or are you sometimes going around with like a half-loaded tank?
Starting off, and Polar Bear knows this, but the Bardo drivers, we're real in tune with hauling a 2,500-gallon load of sulfuric on a 7,000-gallon trailer. It's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Perfect. So you guys can...
Even on a 3,000-gallon trailer, we're still only 2,500 gallons. I mean, it's such a heavy product per gallon that it just doesn't accumulate a lot of, it doesn't accumulate a lot as far as taking up space in the trailer. It just don't.
Right. Okay.
So we do a lot of halvesies and stuff. Easy.
Okay, good. So you'll be able to answer this question then. And Matt, I'll start with you here. How does the liquid surge in a partially filled tanker affect your handling on icy roads? Like, I guess I should say, are there specific things that you have to do to mitigate the surge dynamics when you're not totally full like that, especially in inclement weather?
I'm gonna say it real easy. Whether you're half loaded or fully loaded, and you're in inclement weather, slow it down. Polar Bear can vouch for it, because it just depends on the product, what's going on, how it's happening, everything. It all hits differently. Every one of them hits differently. And when you're in inclement weather, I've gotten up there at exit 11, Polar Bear at Albert Lee, Minnesota, at the Loves.
Oh, yes, 11.
I was heading northbound, and it was icier than heck out. I had a full load on of I believe it was alcohol. I got to the stoplight. Everything was going smooth. It surged, hit, shoved me out into the intersection.
Wow.
So a full load versus a half load, I don't personally think it makes much of a difference. They hit just the same to me.
Okay. Well, and let me ask you this. You said they're all going to hit you. What product hits you the hardest when you feel that surge?
Urea. I think urea is the hardest hit product we haul.
Okay. Interesting.
I think it is.
Okay. How about for you, Polar Bear? Anything that obviously Matt kind of put a pin in it right there by saying slow it down in general. I think that's really good advice, but anything that you do, Polar Bear, that's different from when you're fully loaded or when you're partially loaded to compete with the surge?
Okay, so like I said, back in the day, we used to haul a lot of calcium. We had just gotten from 6,900 gallon to 7,000 gallon trailers isn't a lot, but I remember one day I was talking to Gabe in the shop, and I'm like, man, can we buy any bigger trailers? He goes, why? I said, well, I've got like 3,200 gallons in a 7,000 gallon. He's like, is that a smart ass comment? And I'm like, take it how you want it. But yeah, kind of. Because in Matt's probably had this, especially with the acids and stuff he hauls. It don't matter how slow you take off, especially taking off from a stop. All of that 3,000 gallons, 3,500 gallons is all moving together. And I can't tell you how many times I've taken off, not meaning to, but you just take off a little too quick and it slams to the back. And I'm looking in the mirror. I'm 23 years, this never happened, but I'm waiting for one of these days that bulkhead's going to either front or rear, and I'm going to see a whole load on the, it's just amazing how they build these trailers. It just,
yeah, really
just
resilient,
amazing.
really resilient, and obviously a testament to the equipment and the quality of it that we've got here at Liquid Trucking. That hasn't happened to you yet, Polar Bear. So,
Yeah.
Good news there. Okay, so we've kind of covered the surge dynamics. How about this one? Actually, I probably should have gotten to this earlier since it has to do with pre-trip inspection. Are there any additional steps that you guys take? Polar Bear, I'll start with you. Any additional steps that you take to prepare your tanker and load before heading out in winter weather? Does the pre-trip change at all?
The only thing that I really do is just roll the hood, look over everything really good, and make sure my tires are up. A lot of times I'll go around. Well, back in the day, they used to have that air system at the Loves. If I spent the night there with your tires cold, a lot of times I would go through there and have them check my tires. But yeah, just pay attention a lot more.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because another driver that I talk to frequently used to have, he's retired now, but he used to have something that he would do without fail in inclement weather when he was parked. And that was, he would set an alarm, and he really hated it. Don't think that this is a fun way to do it, but he hated setting an alarm every couple of hours, and he would wake up and move his truck just a few inches back or forward because sometimes he said his wheels would freeze to the ground in certain places.
That's a huge, not even rookie. I mean, I remember one day I left, I think the yard, and I made it probably out to Laramie, Wyoming, and all the way across Nebraska, all the way across to Iowa or Wyoming. It was, I'm going to say 50, 60 mile an hour winds out of the north. It was two-handed. Anybody that drives done it knows what white knuckle driving is. I finally got to the truck stop and I was froze. I just stared straight ahead for, I bet, 10 minutes and just relaxed, breathed.
Wow.
And, breath, however you say the word, breathe, breathed. Yeah. There you go. You know me, I got polarism. So.
Just suck in oxygen and blow out carbon. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah, and I'm just sitting there looking straight out the window, watching these trees bend over, and I'm rocking like somebody's crawling up my tank. I'm rocking. It's just anybody that's driven for any amount of time and has done Wyoming, Utah. Well, even up in even up towards you, Marcus, Idaho, Oregon.
Oh, yeah.
You guys get the crazy winds up there. And it's always in the winter.
Yeah.
Why can't it be an 80 mile an hour day with a 60 mile an hour winds? Why is it always got to be? It wasn't slick. It's just like that. It was cold, but the roads were dry. But it's just, and I'm sitting there watching this box trailer ahead of me. Is my head crooked or is that trailer crooked?
Well, don't ask us if your head's crooked, Polar Bear. We don't want to have to tell you the truth now. Come on.
I just how to breathe good, Bear.
I'm telling you. I like to give Kleich more ammo. That's all I do.
I hear you. Well, hey, you guys pick up all the ammo you can because, and this is just a little tease for something that will happen in a few weeks here on the podcast, but we're cooking up a roast of me, the host of the podcast, by the Teenage Hotline. So be listening and be grabbing material throughout these interviews, fellas, because you're going to get to go at me with both barrels. And I'm really looking forward to it, too. But back to the topic at hand here. Matt, I want to talk to you real quick about your pre-trip, and then I'm going to kick this over to Jason because I know he's probably got some questions for you guys, and he's been quiet and waiting patiently here. So, Matt, talk to me about pre-trip. Does anything change for you when you know you're headed out into these really inclement conditions?
it's, like Polar Bear said, roll your hood, check your tires, check your motor, check the trailer light. Ice hanging off from a light cord can cause it to break. It's just simple stuff like that. But keep an antifreeze and your fuel treatment, I keep an extra gallon or extra 2.5 gallon bottle of DEF in my truck in the cab because they freeze up out at the fuel pumps all the time in the winter. So that's one of the big things for me is just making sure I got all the right supplies to do the job.
How about kitty litter or anything like that in case you get stuck? Are you hauling anything to help, or maybe a little bit of gravel or something like that to put under the tires in that situation?
The company spends quite a bit of money and they give us tire socks.
Oh, I forget about that. Yeah, you're right.
And them things, well, I'm telling you, I've been in the mud with them. I did a 2-dropper down in central Nebraska with OFC. Got stuck in the mud, put them on, got right out. In an ice storm, put them on all 4 tires, climbed right out of it. So those tire socks are very, very useful tools. And, then you're not carrying around extra kitty litter, a shovel, all that stuff. Those socks go on quick, they'll get you out of it, and you just move on.
Perfect.
Just go on, yep.
Perfect.
Can I add something real quick, Marcus?
Of course.
Okay, one thing and if you've been through really slushy, really nasty roads, you're going to collect on your truck and trailer.
Yep.
Try to keep all that off of your truck and trailer because you're just adding weight. Let's say we're running 79.5. You can easily have that 500 pounds of weight or more on your truck and trailer.
Yeah, especially the way that slush can collect up in your wheel wells and stuff like that. 500 pounds is nothing. I mean, you'd grab that in a heartbeat. So good stuff. And also important to keep your lights and things like that clear because when the snow's blowing, it can cover up your headlights in short order. So
and tail lights.
Yeah, tail lights as well.
Can't see your brakes, can't see your blinkers. Good point there, Marcus. Yes.
There you go. Well, hey, listen, this is all stuff I've collected from you guys over the episodes, so don't ever give me credit for it. Just say, hey, way to repeat that thing that smart guy said one time on the podcast.
Okay. Glad to hear you're listening, Marcus.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you can compliment me for is my ears. All right, Jason.
I'm trying to get ready for the good one coming up.
Oh, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Jason, do you have anything you'd like to ask Matt or Polar Bear, or just anything you'd like to add to the conversation? Like I said, you've been just kind of patiently waiting, but we got you here, so might as well talk to you.
Yep, I definitely have some stuff. I didn't want to interject there because both of what they shared is everything that everybody needs to focus on as well. And I was going to back it up a little bit to the whole surge talk. And partner that with, when it does snow and you don't know, if you're in an unfamiliar area or unfamiliar road and you can't quite see, everything you're driving on. One of the things that, from a fleet-wide perspective that we battle over the years is just knowing where your equipment is, because if you get that tractor trailer sloped off to the right or the left, that liquid, doesn't essentially surge, but it will change your center of gravity and it will roll you over. So over the years, we've seen a lot of drivers pull down driveways, roads they're not familiar with, take a minimum maintenance road or, what appears to be a road leading to where they need to get to. And they'll have a slow rollover or darn near slow rollover and get themselves stuck, because if you don't know what you're driving on, it's really important to keep the truck on a solid surface, because it becomes very unstable when you let that liquid start rolling to the driver's side or the passenger side and change that center of gravity. Additionally, a couple other big things that we battle every year, and I don't quite know how to keep getting the word out, but both of these guys will also tell you, they probably hear it a lot, frozen trailer brakes. So every year we have a lot of instances where you'll hook up to a trailer and that trailer's been sitting there for a while and the brakes are froze. So when you do connect to a trailer, you got to do a real good job on that pre-trip to make sure that all of them are rolling freely and you don't need assistance, tapping on them or getting them unfroze, because you'll flat spot and ruin some tires and kind of kill your whole day's production based on where you're at, and it's kind of a big giant Debbie Downer. The other thing when it gets cold out is we seem to drop a lot of trailers. Drivers they'll get in a hurry and they'll back under a trailer, and their tractor, they might have been bobtail for a little bit, and their fifth wheel and their grease gets cold. Maybe their trailer's not quite lined up from a height perspective, but when they connect the tractor to the trailer, that lockjaw doesn't get all the way around the kingpin, and they think they're connected, but they're not. And so when they pull away, they've already raised the trailer legs, and maybe they forgot to do a pull test, or maybe they did do a tug test, and it didn't quite give way yet. But as soon as they start rolling, that loaded trailer falls off the back, and that also creates a lot of damage on the subframes and the legs of the trailers. So wanted to use this opportunity to talk about those three things, because it's probably three of the biggest things we battle in the winter.
Sure. I wanted to touch on something back there. You talked about the roads that might not be fit to keep the truck up on all of its tires. This is obviously where a big point comes in about taking notes on the various customers that you guys visit. Is it the Deliver Recon app? Is that where you guys do that, Jason? Or is there a different place where drivers can take notes on something like that, where, hey, look, this road is not in inclement weather going to fit your truck. You need to go this direction. Where should drivers look for that type of information?
Yeah, DR is a great spot to share that. A lot of times, for those that are listening, DR is only filled with information by your peers, so it's only as good as you make it. So if you do look something up in DR and there's not something mentioned, just remember that because either there's not a hazard or a driver hasn't taken the time to share it. So that gives you the opportunity to share information when you finally make it there and help your fellow driver down the road. Just a reminder for everybody, it's only filled by what drivers put into it. So always an opportunity to share more info, if it's there.
Sure. And Matt and Polar Bear, I want to turn what Jason just said to you guys and talk a little bit about your mode of operation when it comes to the two things that he mentioned there. One, frozen brakes and trailer brakes, and two, dropping the trailer when it's not all the way hooked up properly. Is there anything that you guys do during the winter months, maybe double check that stuff or change your routine at all to make sure that stuff doesn't happen? Matt, I'll start this one with you.
I kind of go into winter mode when this stuff starts happening. They put out safety message. We dropped the trailer. We drug the trailer. The brakes are froze up. With the new disc brakes on the rear, it's a little bit different trying to get them to unfreeze, but very seldom do they freeze because of how they're set up versus drum brakes. With drum brakes, the water can get down underneath the drum, in the drum there, and the pad is set that freezes together. And they do freeze up. So with the disc brakes, you don't have a lot of problems. With the drum brakes, they got airline antifreeze. It's a little trick that I've done over the years. If they won't come loose, just squirt a little airline antifreeze inside there, let it sit for a minute, tap it with a hammer, eventually it'll come loose.
Okay. Yeah.
That's one of my secrets. Other than that, I got a BFH that works pretty good at knocking them loose.
Okay. All right, gotcha.
But the big thing is you can tell when you release the brakes on the trailer and you're hooked up to it. You can go back there and you can look at how the slack adjuster's sitting on with the S cam, and you can tell when they're released and when they're not.
So
because it's going to put all that release pressure against there to release it, and nothing will happen.
Okay. So it sounds like take a little bit more time, and like you said, just kind of put your mindset in a winter mode. This is just going to be a few more minutes you might have to spend each day.
Yep. Like I said, it's better than dragging tires, and the other thing is, like I said, froze up brakes, and you're not hooked up properly, you're gonna leave that trailer where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the perfect storm.
With that being said, the other thing is Jason, I know you remember Greg Olweed. He used to work for us. He was a hell of a trainer.
Yeah.
He told me in the wintertime he would only dolly up enough, about a half to 3/4 of an inch, and then he would just tug the shit out of it. Just tugged it. He said, at least if it comes off your trailer, it's only got 3/4 of an inch to go down.
Yeah, there you go. Good point there. How about for you, Polar Bear? Frozen brakes, dropping trailers in the winter. How do you prevent that stuff from happening to you before you head out?
Yeah, and kind of back to, you said the guy that would set the alarm, just back to the slushy, the wet, you're driving, you're in that slush and it's 30, 40 degrees, but then you park overnight and it's 15, 20. So you can't not move your trailer enough. Within the first hour, like you said, every 10 minutes, just move it a little bit. Just watch your wheels. And I got like a chalk marker, like when they fix a tire.
Mm-hmm.
I got one of them on there. And what I do is I just put a line on the outside of each tire. So as you're looking in both mirrors, you can see, is that line moving? I don't put a very big mark, just big enough that you can see.
Okay.
And another thing I do in the wintertime, I back under, I hook up, I do my tug test. I will go on ahead and lower the airbags a little on my tractor and then do a tug test. That way the trailer's not touching the fifth wheel. It's free. So if you're going to pull, if it's not going to stay hooked, or the jaws is not going to stay locked, then it's going to do it then. And once again, you pull out from underneath of it and your dolly legs are still up.
Sure.
And just, once again, you can't, anytime you assume everything's going to be all right, you know what's going to happen.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
They're accidents for a reason, but there's, like you said, there's preventative, and it's just, I don't know. Out of all the years, one of the things that I hated they did is they put them rumble strips in. When it's 90 degrees out, you hear them, but when there's a foot of snow on the ground, especially on the zipper, you're busting snowdrifts because they haven't been out to clean that part of the road yet. You're inside, you're inside of your lane when you hear that zipper. Even though the snow's over it, you're still going to hear it. That's the only time I like them, is in the wintertime.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's good to know. And I like all of the advice about, the trailer legs and stuff like that. It sounds like there's plenty of different ways to go about making sure that we don't drop those. And obviously it's not something that happens every single day, but as Jason said, look, we deal with this, and it's this is why we have the podcast. Let's get the word out here, right? Gentlemen, I've had you here for quite a while today. I want to let you get back to work. I want to clear the way here real quick for some final thoughts. First and foremost, I will say this has been a great conversation. I feel like we've delved a little bit deeper than just the surface stuff that we've talked about on prior episodes when we talk about winter driving. So thank you guys for discussing this with me. Final thoughts from you, Jason, before we let Matt and Polar Bear get back out on the road.
Yeah, big thanks to both of them for getting on today and talking about, the world of safety. And it takes all kinds. It takes all the experienced guys and our younger guys to come together and share all this information and try and prevent, one more incident from happening, or getting some information to a new driver or newer driver. One of the things I'd leave everybody with is that whole sentiment, about being the CEO of behind the wheel of that whole thing all day long. Just remember that you're the last one that gets to make those decisions. We can always buy, more equipment, but we can never replace people. So you got to make all those decisions based on you as a person first. Make sure that everything down the line from you is safe and gets there safely.
Well said there, Jason. You can replace the equipment. You can't replace the driver. And I appreciate that, because I feel like that's something that, even though we all know that's the mindset here, it helps just to hear it once in a while. Really appreciate you being on here with us today, Jason. That's your VP of HR and Safety, Jason Eisenman. Matt Kleich, final thoughts from you, my friend.
I'm pretty much going to just say, just slow it down. Wintertime is not a time for, we're not NASCAR out here in the wintertime. We're not NASCAR out here in the summertime. But nonetheless, we about lost one of our really, really, really good friends in inclement winter driving, Wendell Yoder. And and we've all learned a little something. Just slow her down. Just slow it down out here. Get home safe, because there's no load, no shipper, no receiver that's more important than you are out here. That's how I feel about it. If you can't make it, don't do it.
Amen to that, and we're glad to hear that Wendell Yoder's still with us, because I hadn't heard about that, but glad to know that he's okay and made it out to the other side of whatever incident he was involved in. And you'll probably get to hear from Wendell when we have our roast of your podcast host coming up here in a few weeks on the podcast. So how about from you, Polar Bear? Final thoughts from you on our winter driving episode.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what Kleich said. You can, just because, hey, just wait. Just because all them other four-wheelers and trucks are doing 60, 65, 70 when you're doing 40, 45. You drive the truck. Don't let that ego drive the truck, because once that trailer starts coming over halfway around, you're done. You can't run fast enough to get that trailer back behind you.
Yep.
And just another thing I got to say is, when you're on your brakes or slowing down, keep an eye in the mirror, because when you're looking straight ahead, you can't see if that trailer's coming around, especially empty. Another thing is, it's not necessarily just the winter, it's the wind. When you're empty, I've had a couple times where I've seen it wiggle or move a little, and it's, I don't know. I've never jackknifed. I hope I never do. It's a scary thought when you see it happening, but yeah, just drive that truck. Don't try to keep up with everybody. If you don't feel comfortable, call in and get off the road, because your dispatcher's not driving it. Roger's not driving it. We are trying to keep it safe for them and to keep making our money. You go in the ditch and hurt something, you're weeks, months, a year from being healed to come back out and start making money. So,
yep.
Safety goes so many places, and this is what this is all about, coming into it.
Absolutely. Well, I have just one quick recommendation for your guys' winter kits, okay? And this just came out of what you just said there, Polar Bear. I might recommend some upholstery cleaner for your seat if you ever do see that trailer in your rearview mirror, okay? Because you're going to want it. Jason, Polar Bear, Matt, Kleich, thank you all so much for being here today. This is a fantastic conversation. I hope it was as informative for the drivers out there as it was for me. Matt and Polar Bear, please keep the shiny side up, stay safe out there, and just follow all your great advice today. And, of course, Jason, we always appreciate the time, man. Thanks for hanging out.
Absolutely. See you guys later.
Yep.
Have a good one, Jason.
All right. Yep. Good talking to you, Jason.
All right, guys.
Man, what an awesome interview we just had with Polar Bear, Matt Kleich, and Jason Eisenman. It's the times that we've talked about winter driving on this show, it seems like we're always getting just a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper into the minds of you drivers out there and how you compete with this stuff. Because, listen, I know it's not easy out there. It's wild out there a lot of the places. I mean, you listen to Jason talk about how, hey, sometimes just the quality of the road that you're on isn't enough to keep this truck upright. It will, the liquid will shift. It's going to pull you off the road, do a slow rollover. Listen, it happens. Same with dropping the trailers and having the brakes freeze up. It's not something that happens every day to everyone, but it is something that happens frequently enough that it's good to talk about here on the podcast. And, of course, just the sage advice that we can get from a guy like Polar Bear and a guy like Matt Kleich, who've been on the road for as long as they have and seen it all. Listen, I know that those guys, if you have their number and you're looking for some advice, maybe an answer, maybe pick up a tip or two about driving in the winter, hauling liquid in the winter, even more specifically, then, give those guys a call. And also another one I want to bring up here is Dan Pijanowski. He's come on the show quite a few times. I know there's people out there that have his number, but he is a very long, if not the longest tenured liquid driver on the fleet. And Dan has told me personally many times that he wants to help these younger drivers. He wants them to reach out and seek advice from him. Polar Bear's the same way. I know Matt's the same way as well. And of course, your resources in the office are always great. Jason having some driving experience there as well. Of course, you've got guys like Cole Brown and Bo Hankey running around there in the office that are now training drivers, but of course have good experience on the road too. So I think the one thing that we should take from this episode is that there's a lot of really good resources around liquid trucking that can help and can make things a little bit safer for you as we get into these real sweaty winter months. And when I say sweaty, I don't mean sweaty because it's warm outside. I mean sweaty because that's what you're doing behind the wheel in the cab a lot of the times. You're sweating. We heard it from Matt and Polar Bear. They both said, listen, man, sometimes it's rough and you got to deal with it. And so, exercise some of these resources. Talk to the people at the company with lots of experience if you're having some trouble, especially out here in the winter months, and get some good advice from these guys. Something we didn't touch on this time was a lot of the stuff that people keep in their cabs. But since we're still kind of having this conversation, I do want to include some things that actually I've got another driver that has given me a list of things that he keeps on his truck. I'm going to pull that up right now, but I want to talk about also something that we talked about the last time we talked about winter driving, and also some trucker wish list stuff. Don't forget that, one of those heated blankets, that's a really good thing to have in your truck just in case you get stuck. I mean, it's not always something that you expect to happen, but if you were expecting to get stuck or stranded, obviously we probably wouldn't be stuck or stranded. So here's another thing. This is a winter prep list that a retired driver, his name is Denny Stone. He's actually he's a great dude. He joins me on another podcast that I do. He came up with this list of things to put in your truck and to just have during the winter. He called it his winter prep list. And you probably already have some of this stuff. And also, it should be noted, Denny drove dry van. He was not a tanker, so maybe a little bit of this stuff you have to kind of move around a little bit or change out so that it works for tugging tanks. But here it is. The winter prep list includes a windshield scraper, a small shovel, a basic toolkit. I'm talking screwdriver, maybe some pliers, maybe a little hammer in there, measuring tape, little stuff like that. Maybe an Allen set could really come in handy. Snow chains and learn how to throw them is one thing that Denny put on this list. Of course, I know you guys have got the socks that get you out of when you're stuck, but of course, there's so many states that have chain requirements on different passes, so got to have a good pair of those. Jumper cables is always a good one. And I've got kitty litter or salt on here, but I'm going to take that off because Liquid supplies the drivers with those socks. So seems like everything works there. Denny always kept his gas tank half full because of the way that the DEF freezes up as it starts to get down below half a tank. So that was always his rule of thumb, half tank at minimum. He would always have anti-gel and anti-freeze in the cab. And, Matt Kleich, back in the interview, he said that's something he's always got 2.5 gallons of DEF because of the way that stuff freezes up. Heavy-duty winter clothes like a coat, waterproof boots, warm gloves, and a hat, just in case. You never know what kind of weather you're going to get trapped outside in. A battery-powered radio is a really good idea. Flashlights and extra batteries. Extra food and water, and Denny makes a special note here. Non-perishables are really good for this because you can throw them on the truck and leave them, and you don't have to worry about them going bad, 3 months down the road. You can leave them on your shelf for a while. A first aid kit, a cell phone charger or an extra cell phone battery, and a CB radio. You'll always remember on this podcast, we talked to Liquid driver Drew Hearn about a story where it was really inclement weather. He was coming up over the top of a big hill. He had his CB on just because, and lo and behold, somebody called and said, hey, if you're coming up over this hill, you better slow down. There is a full-on backup on the downslope. Drew was fully loaded that day, and had that CB call not came over, he thinks he might have run right into the back of that traffic jam before he was able to get slowed down. So really important to remember. I know we don't communicate a lot with the CB radios anymore in the terms of like the convoy stuff, the way that truck drivers used to use the CB radio, but still a really big aspect in the way of safety here for your CB radio to be on and functional. Okay. That wraps it up for Denny's list. I don't have anything else for you guys today. I do want to remind you to jump over to the website, liquidtrucking.com. Click the banner at the top of the page that says check out our new podcast. That is your landing page for everything Liquid Trucking Podcast. You can listen to every single episode that we've ever done there. Plus, each episode, when you go to that episode's little page, will have the episode description. It'll tell you who was on the episode and what we talked about. So if you're looking to kind of thumb through some of these, maybe there was something on there that you wanted to listen to again, that website that you can navigate to by heading over to liquidtrucking.com is your best resource. All right, drivers, I am going to go sit by the fire because all of this winter driving talk has made my toes just a little bit cold. Be safe out there. Keep the shiny side up. Stay warm. Keep those brakes unfrozen and don't drop those trailers. You've been listening to the Liquid Trucking Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in and being the gold standard of drivers on the road. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tune in next week for another episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast.